They've actually shown brain scans where you can see the part of your brain that is normally responsible for managing your emotions, for your rational thinking. Its power is reduced in that phase of your cycle.
Welcome to Behind the Waitlist, the podcast that amplifies the voices of women who've been ignored, dismissed and gaslit for far too long by a system that is not built for us. I'm your host, Kate. I'm somebody who is a women's health advocate. I've been on the waiting list for years and I've been shoved from department to department looking for answers and constantly being told that it's all in my head or just part of being a woman. The podcast started from one simple and painful truth. Far too many women have been left years or even decades waiting for answers. But the wait is finally over. I'm bringing doctors, experts, and educational insights directly to you in a clear and accessible way. Today's episode is on PMDD, Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. It affects approximately 1 in 20 women of reproductive age, and despite how debilitating it is, it goes under-researched, underdiagnosed, and often completely misunderstood. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Elena Venturelli, who is a scientist, a women's health advocate, and somebody who's currently pursuing her PhD in a hormonal device for women. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you as a guest on the podcast. I've obviously been following you for a little while on TikTok. I'm obsessed with your content, so thank you for being here. So I'm so excited to get stuck in, really. So I know obviously you're doing a lot of research on hormones at the moment. What led you into that hormone research, particularly PMDD?
So I've struggled with my own hormones because of PMDD since I was a really young teenager, and I got an email after I finished my master's, which was in physics, so random that I got into hormones, about a device that can potentially monitor hormones 24/7 throughout the day and night, but currently it didn't work for women's hormones. So I saw the project and I thought, this is just another classic way in which women's hormones are not studied. Most medical research and scientific research in general is just done on male rats or even male cells, and the female cycle is just completely ignored because it complicates everything. So I just decided to keep applying over and over again, and it was so hard to get funding. So many scientists just prefer to go the easy route, and it's so much easier to control for variables if you just use men, because it just makes everything a lot simpler. And so I even was at a conference the other day, and there was a presentation on autism in rats, and I asked the question, did you account for sex differences? But no, they just studied male rats.
That's crazy. But is that based on like requirements? For example, if you want to pass a drug or like something new in the medical industry, does it have to be tested on women, or can it just be tested on men? That's crazy.
Yeah, there's no requirements for them to test things on women, and most of the time they just take whatever results they've gained from male tests and apply the same things to females, which is why women have 50% more chance of having side effects from basically any drug, and about 80% of drugs still on the market were only tested on men. And then we get gaslit when we experience side effects.
It's crazy. I think the medical trials started on women in 1995 or something. That was when they first started.
Yeah, I think previous to that it was actually banned in America to have women of reproductive age be part of clinical trials.
That's crazy. Insane. And so for the people at home that don't quite know what PMDD is, what would you say it is in a nutshell?
So it is a actual brain inflammation. It's a very physical disorder, and it causes severe anxiety, depression and mood swings before the period, 10 to 7 days before the start of your period. And the misconceptions are that it's just a severe form of PMS, but it isn't. It causes immunity and inflammation responses. So your brain is actually hypersensitive to the hormonal changes that go on the week before your period. It's not about the hormones themselves, which is another thing people get confused and think it's just a hormone imbalance. It's a sensitivity to the changes in the hormones. The levels could be completely normal, but it's that sensitivity that causes your brain to react in an extreme way, because there's something really wrong with the way that your brain processes the chemicals that the hormones make.
That's fascinating. And it's mainly in the luteal phase, you mentioned.
Yeah,
sort of
so
pre-menstruation.
the sort of the mark of PMDD is often really severe symptoms the week before your period, but then you're kind of normal the rest of the time. And so a lot of women feel like, well, you know, I'm fine most of the time, why all of a sudden am I going absolutely crazy? And it is because those hormones are so powerful, and people really underestimate the power of hormones when it comes to our brains, our mental health, our mood, and everything about us. The hormones are part of a system that controls everything in our body. So why do we think of them as just like a woman's thing, and you know, basically say, oh, it's just her hormones, whatever. You hear that quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say the main symptoms of PMDD?
So the main symptoms of PMDD are depression, anxiety, mood swings the week before your period, and people also experience like sleep problems. People experience also things like joint pain. The problem is that, you know, it's mainly is mental symptoms, but the NHS particularly and loads of articles tend to overemphasize the physical symptoms. Like on the NHS website, it literally says, oh, joint pain as the first symptom, as if 30% of women with PMDD attempt suicide in a lifetime because of joint pain. Like, it's not the joint pain that is the main cause of this, but it's difficult because the fact that it's the intersection between mental health and menstrual health and women's problems and hormones, all of these things are quite poorly understood and also quite taboo. And so it's just this melting pot of complete misunderstanding for people with PMDD, and you just feel like you're crazy. Like you feel like you're a terrible person because why can't you control your emotions? And people don't understand that it can be the hormones, and that even, you know, there is a link to PMDD and trauma. You are more likely to have PMDD if you've had trauma. That doesn't mean it's the same as PTSD. That doesn't mean it's caused by trauma. It just means that trauma can cause you to have a heightened immune response, which can then make you more likely to develop PMDD. And it's also genetic. There's no and or when it comes to being trauma related or being genetic and physical and real. And that means that it's just really poorly understood from that respect.
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, as you were saying, you know, it's just hormones. It's very much mocked, I think, like, oh, it's her hormones again. She's crying, she's erratic, whatever. But actually experiencing that can be debilitating. And I think just thinking about kind of the effects on women's lives in the workplace, you know, potentially being dismissed or not having that time off, or in relationships. I mean, what are the real effects of PMDD for these women?
I think it's interesting you talk about relationships, because it is so difficult for other people to understand what you go through when you're in that phase and when you're having these PMDD symptoms, because it's like something just completely takes over your body and you turn into a different person, and then you feel terrible because you respond in such a over dramatic way to your partner if your partner like triggers you in some way, in a way that normally you would be able to process correctly, but you're literally unable to cope with the things that you would normally be able to. So it makes it a lot harder for people to be in relationships. Makes it a lot harder for people to stay in relationships, and it's very difficult to also advocate for yourself in a relationship, because people feel like they're using it as an excuse for bad behavior. And often most people don't even know that they have it, so they just think that they're a bad person, or that there's something wrong with their personality, or they're misdiagnosed with something else like borderline personality or bipolar even. I mean, they tried to tell me that I had everything else under the sun before they said PMDD, and then even when they said you have PMDD, after that I kept telling various health professionals that I had it because that's what I was diagnosed with, but they didn't know what it was. So having a diagnosis wasn't even really helpful, because I just kept having to explain over and over and try and get them to take seriously what was something that was debilitating that I was living with. But they just think that it's either severe PMS, which it's not, or they just think you're making it up. Like, I still get comments with people saying this is just a made up disease.
It's insane. It's crazy. And it's the like lack of knowledge and the misunderstanding, even when you were mentioning there, like how NHS categorizes the symptoms of PMDD, it's not very clear. And when you're not in that kind of like headspace to maybe process things rationally, it can be so overwhelming, I can imagine. I guess in terms of the data, what kind of data are we seeing at the moment for PMDD? Have we got scans on the brain or anything like that we're physically seeing?
Yeah, so they've actually shown brain scans where you can see, depending on what areas of the brain have lit up, you can see the part of your brain that is normally responsible for managing your emotions, for your rational thinking, its power is reduced in that phase of your cycle. And they've shown that there isn't effective communication between the emotional part of your brain and the frontal decision-making rational part of your brain.
Wow.
So it's actually a physical difference that they can see, PMDD versus someone without PMDD, that the person with PMDD has physical reasons in their brain that they cannot control their emotions. So it is literally beyond their control. And there is evidence for the fact that it's impossible to keep your emotions in, where you just have this overwhelming sensations.
It's quite audacious then for medical professionals to say it's all in your head. I mean, quite literally it is all in your head.
Literally it is, yeah.
That's crazy that we're seeing that kind of data. And what are the gaps of knowledge, would you say?
So, I mean, there's been like the trauma link. There's been a lot of kind of controversy around that. And we're only really just getting there in terms of understanding, oh, well, it is a brain sensitivity, and it is related to the immune system, and it's related to inflammation. But all of these pieces are like quite difficult to coming together, but they're only just starting to get there, and there's still so much misunderstanding around it. And in terms of treatments, there's also not really any good treatments. Most of the treatments that are available are just things that were used for other things that they're just giving you because they don't have anything specific for PMDD.
So what are specifically the current treatments? Say, I go to the GP and I explain what's happened, and I don't maybe mention PMDD, and I just explain I'm feeling really low. I mean, what is kind of the go-to of GPs in that scenario? If
they follow the guidelines on how to treat PMDD, the first course is antidepressants. But studies have shown that only has 60% improvement in symptoms, but that's with a 30 to 35% placebo, which means that 30 to 35% people felt better without the antidepressants. The second option is contraceptive pills, but the evidence for those helping is even lower than that for antidepressants.
Yeah. And if it's just affecting women sort of a week before their period, it seems quite a lot to go on antidepressants or contraception throughout that month, and then you're going to get side effects from other things.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they do say you can take the antidepressants cyclically, so you only take them in the luteal phase. However, that's something that I tried, and I found that it was difficult to actually get used to them, because it's not really a good solution, and I found that it didn't help my symptoms anyway, really. And then beyond those two forms of treatment, the next ones are more extreme. So chemical menopause is also an option, and some women have even had full hysterectomies because their symptoms have been so bad and they just can't live with them anymore as they are. The good news is that there are trials being done specifically on PMDD to try and find specific solutions that actually work. And one of the ones that I'm quite a big fan of is HRT. So usually if you have the chemical menopause, you go through HRT after that. But in the UK, there's actually clinics that offer HRT without chemical menopause. So you take bioidentical hormones which help to level out those hormone shifts, which it's the shifts that are causing the symptoms. And because of that, people tend to have an easier time, and it seems to work quite well for people. However, you still have to take progesterone, so you still get, so for instance, I take HRT, estrogen gels rubbed into my skin every day, but I also have to take progesterone for 10 days a month to protect my womb. And when I take the progesterone, I notice an increase in anxiety.
Wow. So, but is both of those treatments for specifically PMDD? Because what were you saying about protecting the womb? I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah, so that is quite a new treatment and only available in like specific clinics for menopausal and PMS. The protection of the womb is because taking estrogen without progesterone can like increase risks of various cancers. So, and that's something that there's been a lot of sort of controversy around HRT, and it's been in the media a lot recently because the risks are really printed out, obviously, and there's sort of so much emphasis on the risks that it's putting a lot of people off HRT. HRT is quite inaccessible for people, but there are still the same risks or sometimes more risk with contraceptive pills, but not the same sort of fear-mongering is being had around those.
And are these treatments all available on the NHS, or would you need to go private?
I don't believe that HRT would be available on the NHS. I got it privately.
Insane. Wow, because even women going through menopause, would that still be a private?
You can get it for menopause on the NHS, but it's quite difficult to do. I've heard stories of women trying for years and years, and then you only really get the benefits if you take it soon around menopause, because if you take it too long after menopause, it can actually increase your risk of Alzheimer's and things like that.
Oh my gosh, and the only reason why they're waiting is because the NHS or the doctors aren't actually taking them seriously.
Yeah. Another case of women being dismissed in medicine.
It's crazy. It feels sometimes like a full-time job having to advocate for yourself. And especially, you know, if a woman is naturally more timid or not able to kind of stand up for themselves, they might bring their partner in the room or somebody else, and we shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things about PMDD as well, is that not only are you dealing with debilitating symptoms, not only do you feel crazy, not only does no one understand you and there's barely any awareness, you also have to constantly fight against medical professionals. You have to constantly argue and try and say your part and try and, like, I will bring a literal folder with me into a medical appointment and just hand them like research papers, because I know that they haven't seen them, because in the medical curriculum, it wasn't even compulsory to study women's health until recently. So most trained doctors have no clue about anything about women's health, let alone PMDD.
It's infuriating because we're 50% of the population. Why is our health not important?
It's crazy.
And I suppose with your personal kind of experience getting diagnosed and getting access to treatment, would you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so when I was 17, or I was just turning 18, because I was seeing the child mental health service, and they kicked me out because I was turning into an adult, and I was on the waiting list for adult mental health, and I also, my mum got me an appointment with an endocrinologist, so I got those 2 referrals from the GP, both for adult mental health and to endocrinologists. And I remember this so vividly because I was going through my PMDD week, and I was in my mum's bed, just unable to really do anything. Everything just felt completely black when I was in that phase, and I couldn't see anything good with the world. Everything felt horrible and oppressive, and it's like other people and any good things were completely inaccessible to me. And I was suicidal, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I even told my mum, you know, I can't do this anymore, like, you know, can you help me? And in that week, the same week, I got 2 letters. One was from the adult mental health service, and it said that because my problem was hormonal, they couldn't treat me. And then the other letter was from the endocrinologist saying that I was too young and they usually treat menopausal women. So all of a sudden I had absolutely no support, because I fell through the crack which so many women fall through, where there isn't a service that encompasses the things that we need, the things that our diseases that are specific to women tend to span across multiple areas because of our hormones. They span across our hormones, our guts, our inflammation, and our mental health. But there aren't integrated services for these things. It's separate doctor for your digestion, separate doctor for this and you know, psychiatrists and whatever. So women are just being left basically, and they're just falling through the cracks and not able to access the help that they desperately need. And I believe that that's why there's such a high attempted suicide rate for women with PMDD.
It's just so frustrating. I think I can definitely relate to it as well with endometriosis. I have bowel endometriosis, and you know, I'd be referred to, okay, IBS, or it's this issue, and it's like, it's actually all encompassing, as you were saying. And I think a lot of women especially get sent to gyno, and you know, in the UK right now, the gynecologist waiting list is about a year or longer. And it's like, you wait a year to have an appointment to then be shoved to a different department. And it's like, especially when you're not in the mental headspace, it's so damaging. And I guess, why is PMDD so misunderstood by medical professionals and also just as a society?
It's quite a big question, really. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. As I was saying, it's like the stigma of periods in general. There's the stigma of menstrual health, and the shame that we're taught as women to hold on to from a young age, not to speak about our bodies, not to, you know, like our bodies, and to think of them as something to hide away or something to be ashamed of. And that leads to, for a start, women not wanting to be very open or not feeling comfortable enough to be open about their cycles and about changes that are going on during their cycles. And then there's the added taboo of mental health, not wanting to admit that you have mental health problems, and the fact that, you know, when you do eventually admit to having these problems, that it's usually labeled as something which it isn't. And I think that I think there's something like 90% of women are actually undiagnosed, and there's a 50% higher chance of being diagnosed with bipolar if you're a woman, and they think that that's because a lot of women who are diagnosed with bipolar are actually misdiagnosed and have PMDD. So you know, it's the combination of those factors, the stigma around periods, the stigma around mental health, and also the lack of research on women more generally. Our bodies aren't well understood. So many facts about our biology are recently coming to light that were completely unknown before, or, you know, were completely contradictory to what was originally believed, like the fact that we had no nerve endings in our cervix. That they've now shown that there's loads of nerves in there. Like, is crazy. The fact that it's the egg, when it's fertilized, the egg actually selects the sperm, whereas we've always been told it's just the fastest sperm that wins the race. But it's not true. But it's a male-centered science. Like, science has been male-centered since it started. So it's going to take a lot of catching up for women's bodies for us to fully understand women's health conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes to my question. A lot of women say, and I've experienced it as well, when you go to the GP with any symptom, they'll say, go on the pill. Do you think that's because of just the lack of knowledge, or like maybe like they don't want to put the effort into referring you, or whatever it may be?
It's just an easy one-size-fits-all solution. Like, basically no effort. I mean, that's what they tell you for basically anything related to hormones and women's health. And it's happened to me. I've tried loads of different pills. I actually hallucinated on one of the pills that I was given.
Which one was it?
That was Yasmin.
Oh God, I've heard bad things about Yasmin.
It was I mean, and you know, some people, they get on the pill and it does help and it masks their symptoms. That's what it does. It's, I think there was a quote from a book, I think it was Alyssa Vitti, telling you to go on a contraceptive pill for women's health issues is like putting a band-aid on a flashing light on a car that's telling you something is wrong. Like, it is like that, because it's like, well, you know, we'll just mask the underlying symptoms. Those are still going on in the background. Those are still over time probably getting worse, and then when eventually you do get off the pill, you're going to have worse problems. And it's like, rather than actually treating the underlying causes, rather than listening to women and trying to figure out what they could do holistically to help themselves, and what medications might help them in different areas that are connected, it's just seen as such a separate thing. And I think that's the problem, because it is seen as just hormones and there isn't enough research into them anyway. But because it is separated from mental health, it's separated from digestion and everything else, that's where none of the solutions that could be found if there was a more integrated approach have been found.
You mentioned holistic there, something that I'm really interested in. Do you have any advice to women at home that are suffering with PMDD but maybe don't want to go down the antidepressants route and kind of want to do holistic, accessible things from home?
Yeah, so I've actually got quite into this because through my own journey, I had such terrible experiences with antidepressants, pills, everything. So I started exploring Ayurveda, which is a traditional Indian medicine, thousands of years old, and a lot of the herbs and things that they recommend have recently had a lot of scientific backing and studies to actually show it's effective and why is it effective.
Oh, wow.
And that's something that I used. I had terrible gut issues and it helped me resolve the gut issues. The main purpose of Ayurveda is to look at the whole person, and that's what holistic means really. Is they look at your lifestyle, your mental health, your diet, your sleep, your routines, and a practitioner will account for all these things and give you recommendations for every aspect, and they're also personalized depending on your body type, depending on your symptoms. So, and that is the sort of thing that we need in traditional medicine as well. We need systems where women are told these are things that can help with your inflammation, these are things that can help with your immunity, these are things that can help with your hormones, and this is how to plan around your cycles. There's so many things that you could do. But mental health is such an important and underrated aspect of it as well, because I was saying earlier about the link with trauma. It's not just PMDD that has a trauma link. All women's health issues, they've shown recently, have higher chance of occurring with previous trauma or with generational trauma, because you can actually inherit trauma epigenetically. Some parts of your DNA change throughout your lives, and if those parts are affected because of traumatic stress in your body that manifests physically, you can pass on those parts of your DNA to your offspring. And that's one of the theories as to why PMDD is trauma linked but also genetic. When you have PMDD because your mum and your grandma had PMDD, you were already born sensitive at the outset and more likely to develop it because of the genes that you were passed on to you that had effects due to like previous trauma of your ancestors, which is mind-boggling, really.
That is. And I suppose especially in our mothers and our grandmothers' generation, I can't imagine they ever learned what PMDD is. So perhaps it's like the lack of knowledge to say to my daughter, actually you're going to be more susceptible to this. So I can imagine it's a really difficult place to be in. What kind of data are we seeing at the moment? I know you mentioned a little bit, but are there any like statistics or anything that you can share with us?
So you're 4 times more likely to develop PMDD if you've had childhood trauma.
Wow.
And there's similar kind of stats depending on the severity of abuse, even for things like PCOS and endometriosis. And the reason for that is traumatic stress causes an immune response in your body, and the mechanism with PMDD specifically is that immune response can cause brain inflammation, and then your brain becomes more sensitive to these specific hormone changes.
Wow. That's insane. Is it just as well from childhood trauma, or if a woman has been maybe in an abusive relationship as well, does that also affect? Any
traumatic stress can affect your genes. So you could develop worsened PMDD symptoms due to increased stress throughout your life. And that's why it's important as part of a treatment regime for people to also be treated for mental health and for addressing traumas that they already have and emotional triggers that they have. Because if you're constantly being emotionally triggered throughout your life, that is constantly putting your body in a state of heightened stress, which is leading to more inflammation and worsening all your women's health symptoms. So one of the things that I'm focusing on at the moment in my work is I'm helping women to rewrite their emotional responses and remove emotional triggers that are what's causing their anxiety, because that anxiety is just continuing to keep your body in this fight or flight state that is over time worsening symptoms.
Yeah. And in terms of accessibility with those treatments, so if a woman is to go to the mental health service and say that I want to have CBT, or what kind of things should she be asking for to kind of unpack those triggers?
I think trauma-informed therapy is important.
Okay.
CBT is great for a lot of people. They have done studies showing that CBT helps with PMDD. Through my experience, a lot of people also find that while CBT is helpful for managing behaviours, it can be frustrating when you have no control over your emotions, to be told, you just need to do this and react this way, when it's your body that is causing you to react that way. So there's only so much you can do in terms of having emotional management and behaviour techniques. They're still completely helpful. And everyone should have it, in my opinion, because it allows you to, have much better mental health aside from your PMDD, and then you can manage your PMDD more easily. So I think it is so great for that, but it doesn't discover underlying causes. It's very emotional management based rather than deep work. And so I do think deep work is something that's important for PMDD, and that's one of the things that has completely changed my life with it and enabled me to live a great life and feel like my PMDD, I can honestly say, doesn't really affect me anymore.
Wow.
Because of the amount of triggers that I've able to remove from myself.
That's amazing. And to get that trauma-informed therapy, is it called, is that available in the NHS or?
I'm not sure about that, but there are many therapists who use trauma-informed approaches.
Okay. All right, so it's somewhat accessible. Maybe any books you recommend or anything like that?
The Body Keeps Score.
Yes, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, there are a lot of books discussing how it all works and the impact that it has, and that one's particularly good because it discusses the physical link between trauma and the effect of trauma on the body.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I need to read that book. It's on my list. And then I kind of want to touch on the suicide. I know it's a really heavy topic, but it's definitely not spoken about, particularly with PMDD. I mean, what do you kind of know about it? What are the effects and what are we seeing at the moment? So
the statistics are that if you have PMDD, there's a 30% chance you will attempt suicide in your lifetime. And it's pretty heartbreaking because most women, will go through their whole lives feeling depressed, feeling suicidal around their periods, and it just gets worse and worse. Gosh. And they get to a point where they're so ignored and feel so alone and just even hate themselves. I mean, I hated myself for a long time because I had this narrative in my head that was like, why am I like this? Why can't I handle things like normal people can? Why are other people able to deal with their emotions but I'm not? There's something seriously wrong with me. Why am I like this? And my brain would tell me, well, it's because you're weak. And this is something that I've heard from a lot of women that I've worked with as well, just genuinely believing that you're a bad person and that you're weak because you cannot respond in a normal way. And the loneliness of it as well, because most women don't know they have it, so they don't know other women who have it, and no one else understands and no one else seems to have any clue. I mean, it's so difficult for someone who doesn't have PMDD to understand what the experience is, because you almost couldn't fathom what it's like to feel like a different person for half the month. And women that do just feel so hopeless, and what makes it so much worse is the fact that you're constantly being gaslit. You're constantly being, you know, told that, well, you know, that you're exaggerating, or that it can't be that bad, or, you know, and women with PMDD are more likely to be in abusive relationships because and I've had personal experience of this where I always believed that because I had PMDD, that meant there was something innately wrong with me, that I was somehow bad, and that I didn't deserve to be in a better relationship, and that no one, you know, a good man wouldn't want me because they're just going to have to take care of me my whole life, and why would they want to have children with me when I'm just going to pass on this thing that makes me like crazy every month. So I think this is people who are unheard, you know, no one is helping them, they feel hopeless, and young girls as well. Like I was like only 14 when I started getting symptoms.
Baby.
Yeah. And so there's just young girls like growing up just thinking that they're horrible and that there's something so badly wrong with them, and then they're never getting the support that they need. Their family, their friends are probably telling them, you just need to try harder.
Yeah, get a grip.
I know. And another tricky thing is that, you know, a lot of women have PMS, like most women have some form of PMS, but a lot of the time it's relatively mild, and I've had the experience where people told me, oh yeah, I get a bit moody before my period as well.
Not the same thing.
And you just sort of think, oh my God, like how can I explain to you how, like, what this actually is and how much worse it is? And it kind of, it makes you feel like you're being over dramatic, and it kind of diminishes what people go through, which is why I hate it when people say, oh, PMDD is a severe version of PMS. It's an easy way to describe it, but it's completely inaccurate because it has different causes, and also it makes it seem like less severe than it is, and it's really difficult to keep advocating for yourself because you end up just believing all the gaslighting as well, or all the, you know, the comments and things. You end up just thinking, oh, well, yeah, actually other people get the same symptoms but they just deal with them better.
God, it's so easy to fall down that hole, I think, and it can be so isolating. I guess to the women that do kind of want support, are there any support groups or ways that you would recommend women getting involved?
Yeah, so there's actually a really good charity called IAPMD, so it's International Association for Premenstrual Disorders, and they have loads of resources on there. They have a map of where you can find providers all around the world. They have resources to bring to your local GP, and and they're always putting out new like research papers on there, and they have support groups and frequent events, and they fundraise for PMDD, so they're a really good place to look.
Amazing. And in terms of sort of the research that you're doing, so I know you've spoken a little bit about the triggers and trauma. Is there anything else that is fascinating about what you're learning and researching at the moment? Where to start?
Yeah, I think that the most shocking thing for me since becoming a scientist, like studying these things, is how little we actually do know, and how much bad information there is out there, and like bad science and biased science. Because when you look up literature on contraceptive pills, you get a lot of articles with headlines like, you know, women gossiping about or myths versus reality, you know, contraceptive pill side effects or whatever. And I've actually read papers and just been sat there just so angry because these papers were written just in such a biased way, and they're gaslighting in the literature. So it's like, no wonder you go to doctors and get medically gaslit if this is all the literature that it's based off of. And like the science being done on just men is a major problem. And everything that I look at, I look at things really critically now, because I know that there's so much wrong with science, and there's so much, there's, you know, science is brilliant and it's helped us do amazing things, but you always have to look at things critically, because there's always going to be bias. There's always going to be, who funded this research on this pill, for instance. Like, if a lot of the time the research on the drug is being funded by the company that is trying to sell the drug. So that's going to impact what results that they show. It's going to impact the way they present their results to try to convince you that this drug is better than the competitor's drug. There is so much of that in medical research,
really?
And so it's really difficult to tell what's good and what's not, and that's why you have to look more broadly for trends in literature and sources. You can't just rely on one paper being accurate or representative.
But as someone who isn't a scientist, or doesn't know how to read the papers or kind of distinguish everything, I mean, what would you recommend there? I mean, 'cause you don't really know where to turn and what's accurate and unbiased, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's review papers can be quite good for getting a general overview, but they can be sort of quite jargony and things.
Yeah.
So it is difficult. But I think there's a lot of people on social media who are like scientists who are, trying to describe studies to people, and I think that's something that makes it really accessible for people.
Yeah, that's a really good shout, actually. I've noticed that a lot of times when we're talking about women's health, it's like women on TikTok or YouTube and stuff, rather than actually like the NHS's website or GPs themselves. And sometimes it feels a bit silly, doesn't it, like going there for your information, but we don't really have a choice.
Yeah, we don't really, and it's so important for people to be out there, spreading awareness of these things. And because I think there was something about how most young girls learn about periods through TikTok and not through their doctors or their schools. And so but that is just because we have to fill this gap of knowledge and of awareness that just isn't there for women and for young girls.
No, exactly. It wasn't until I think last year I learned about the different stages of the cycle. I had no idea. I was like, why do I feel awful like 2 weeks before my period? And then I learned about the luteal phase. But no, it's really challenging. And I suppose like in terms of stress and cortisol and everyday life, like a lot of us women are now in the workforce and under a lot of pressure. How does that impact PMDD?
It can be really difficult for women with PMDD because you have such fluctuating symptoms and it's not something that workplaces take into account. And this is something I'd like to do more about. I'd like to go into workplaces and spread awareness, because there's been a lot of awareness on menopause now in the workplace. And this is just the beginning, because we need to look at, all phases of women's life and their cycles and how these things affect you in the workplace. There should be a lot more contingencies for women with endometriosis, with PMDD, having more flexible working during certain times of the month. And people, I think a lot of like women seem to be quite against the idea that you should have days off for your period, but it's not weakness. It's not showing, we're not as good at men at working or whatever. It's just because the work week is designed around men. The work day is designed around men because men have 24-hour cycles. So men's testosterone is higher in the morning and lower in the evening. So evening time is when you relax. But for women, it's not designed around women. So, there should be more systems that allow for the fact that we will have increased productivity at certain times of the month, like in the follicular and ovulatory phases, and then we'll have decreased productivity at other times. But if we're actually allowed to pay attention to that and to adjust for that, we can actually have better work-life balance, better well-being, better productivity overall, because we're not constantly trying to be the same all the time and trying to just catch up, which is actually even probably worse for companies, because you have more sick days and you have, lower well-being the rest of the time. So I think it's in companies' best interest to actually account for the fact that women's needs are different, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say that they are. Our strengths and our skills are also different in a good way.
I think stress definitely worsens symptoms. Then, as you say, you have more sick days. So how would you recommend that kind of like map out? I know that some countries have menstrual leave, or whether it's something where, you know, as you say, private companies or charities go in and speak to workplaces. How do you think we kind of get that message out there?
Just more awareness, basically, because I think a lot of men in workplaces don't really understand how the cycle impacts our energy levels, our productivity. I mean, women don't either. Most people don't really know these things. So, but with that awareness, I think things will automatically then shift towards there being menstrual leave, or there being more flexible hours for women depending on their time of the month, and then that will probably have a knock-on effect and improve things for maternity as well, because those are crazy hormone changes that there isn't enough done to support women. And it's in companies' best interest to support the diversity that women bring to a workplace, because with that comes different strengths and different ways of looking at things that you wouldn't think, and you could actually learn something for the workforce as a whole by paying attention to these energy shifts. It's something that you could apply. It's not about, you know, not everyone needs to fit into the same mold. You can actually have a better workplace culture and environment by taking into account people's well-being more. Yeah, absolutely.
And going a little bit back to your research, so I noticed earlier you mentioned a little bit of resistance maybe with studying hormones, or, you know, the fact that a lot of studies aren't actually done on female hormones. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. So what are the kind of restrictions in place, or what are you struggling with?
Yeah, so for me specifically, my supervisor told me, don't study estrogen because it's too chemically sticky and in too low concentrations, and it's going to be much harder for you in your PhD project to detect it. So I would just go with something easier to detect, like testosterone. And I wasn't having any of that. I was like, I'm just going to do it the hard way, but I'll do it my way.
Yeah.
And I will. And my focus has shifted to, I'm going to find a way to be able to detect the estrogens, because there must be a way to do it, because I'm just not having it. We're not ignoring women's hormones again, because there's already, you know, such a lack of representation for women in trials, because you need to control for the fact that women are all in their different phases of their cycles at different times. Even rats have estrous cycles, which need to all be synced up, and it does complicate things. Which is why I kind of love the device that I'm working on, in a sense, because it enables us to get data over 24-hour periods, which can then allow us to better understand these hormone shifts, so that we can take that into account in other research, so that it's not just guesswork as to whether, how are their hormones like affecting everything. Once we have background knowledge of what goes on for most women and how women's hormones fluctuate depending on everything in their month, then we can apply this to research to be able to include women more. So it's a sort of strategy to enable more equal research and hopefully closing the gender health gap.
I'm so intrigued by this device. Is it a wearable device? Is it like an app? Tell me more.
Yeah, so it's a wearable device. It inserts just below the surface of the skin, so it's minimally invasive. You wear it as a belt, and every 15 minutes it will collect a hormone sample and put it in a it's quite rudimentary. We're working on better versions of it to come, but you can tell what hundreds of hormones are doing at 15 minutes throughout the day and night. And at nighttime, it's not something that has been done before. They've shown cortisol patterns increasing before you wake up and causing you to wake up, rather than what was originally thought, that you wake up and then your cortisol peaks. But they were never able to study hormones during the night, because you can't take a blood test while someone's sleeping. It's going to affect the results of what their hormones are doing. And this, because people can wear it and go out and, you know, do their shopping and their exercise and whatever, you can tell how, you know, their meal times, their diet, their exercise, their sleep, how all of that is affecting their hormones. So if we have large enough samples of people doing it, large enough like data, we'll be able to really get a better understanding of how all these hormones interlink.
So is it something that's going to be brought to market, or something that's just kind of for scientists studying at the moment?
So at the moment it's a medical research device, so it's not currently commercialized, but there is a startup that's come out of a spin out of University of Bristol that is working on commercializing it currently.
Oh, amazing. Oh, that's so exciting. So just to kind of round off, I know there's been some heavy topics that we've covered, so I kind of just want to talk about a little bit of signs of hope, I suppose. So what changes would you love to see in medicine or policy to better support women, especially women suffering with PMDD?
So I think the first step is there needs to be awareness. People need to talk about it. People need to shout about it. I won't shut up about it. I'll go to party and I'll be telling people, do you know what PMDD is? I've genuinely done this in a club before as well. They probably thought I was really weird, but I'm constantly telling people about it. Trying to explain it to people, because it is getting better, but most people still don't really know what it is, and it doesn't help that it has kind of a bad name as well. It's kind of confusing acronym. But that's the major thing. I think there needs to be awareness in medicine first and foremost. There needs to be specific training on PMDD for doctors, and other health professionals, mental health professionals as well. That's where we have to start. We have to change the NHS website that says that the first symptom, that lists the first symptom as joint pain, which just really irks me. Yeah. And then from there, we need to get more media traction. We need more people talking about it. We need more people talking about hormones in general, women's health in general, in the workplace and outside. And eventually it will be a common thing that everyone has heard of, like ADHD.
Yeah, no, exactly. And other than women kind of just talking about it to raise awareness, are there any campaigns, protests, anything like that we can get involved with?
I know that IAPMD regularly holds events and campaigns, especially during, I think April every year is PMDD Awareness Month. Okay. So that's when they do a lot of things. But I'm gonna do stuff as well. There will be plans for more awareness spreading for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And in terms of the research right now, what is giving you hope? I know obviously you're studying hormones. Is there anything else that's going on that we should kind of be all ears to?
I think in general, femtech is on the rise. There are a lot of women who are fed up with being medically gaslit, being ignored, and they're doing things about it. There's startups using various hormone monitoring devices that are being developed. There's women-led cycle tracking apps like Stardust. Yeah. And there is really a growing market for this, and it is powerful because it means that women are finally going to have a say and an influence on what women's health is looking like, and in doing so they're spreading awareness. They're helping women take back control of their own bodies and their own narratives.
Absolutely. It's a new wave of feminism, and I'm loving it. And I guess if you could speak to your younger self or women listening, what would you say?
It's not your fault. You're not broken. What you're going through is horrible, but there is another side to it. There is help available, and you may feel so alone and so hopeless, but there are millions of other women who are going through the same thing. It's just not many of us know about each other. And over time there's going to be better help, and there are support networks out there. There's other people going through the same thing, and there's people that have been where you are who are doing things about it. The only reason that I'm doing a PhD at all is because of PMDD, because when I was in my darkest place, I thought, no one should have to feel this way. No one should be so unheard and so alone and misunderstood. And I feel that everything that I do, I feel that, and that's the thing that motivates me to do these. And there's a lot of women that are the same. Women are fed up. We're done with the way things are currently. We are done.
We are done.
And that's why there is, that women are doing amazing things now and starting these femtech companies and raising awareness and starting charities, because it's time. It really is. And there is hope. The treatments are getting better. But most of all, it's, you're not a bad person. You're not weak. Don't let anyone tell you that it's your fault, because it's just not.
Well, that's so inspiring. Thank you so much for being a guest, and I really hope that the women listening are going to be inspired by your story, and hopefully they get some help and guidance.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for watching. If today's episode resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and comment your story below. It's so important that we build a community of women that come together and share our insights. A percentage of today's episode's profits will be donated to the PMDD project, which helps people suffering with the disease. If you want to learn more about Elena's work, I'll drop her TikTok and Instagram links below. I'm so excited to see you next time on Behind the Waitlist.